Our committee meeting for the day. Our first item on the agenda is request for bill introductions. This will be the last day for us to have that on the agenda. Committee, do you have any requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, do we have any requests for bill introductions from the audience? Seeing none, we will move forward. Next thing on the agenda that we will handle is approval of minutes for January the 10th, January 16, 17, and 18. Those were emailed to you. We trust that they were received. If not, I don't know what to tell you other than they should have been. And if they were not received, we can hold off approval. But Senator Dahl.
I move that we approve them.
Approve the minutes as presented?
Yeah.
All right.
But took the words right out of my mouth.
Is there some words I can put in your mouth as well? Okay. All right, there has been a motion to approve the minutes for January 10th, January 16, 17, and 18, moved by Senator Dahl, seconded by Senator Reichman. Discussions on the motion, or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We had on our calendar an informational briefing from the Hilmar Cheese Company, but the gentleman who is going to make the presentation is stuck in California, or as some would say, California, because of bad weather, so he is not here today. We may reschedule that at a future date. We'll just have to see how scheduling plays out. Next thing on the agenda is continued budget hearing for the Department of Agriculture. And as we left off on Thursday, Secretary Beam was at the mic, but he informed us he would not be able to be with us today. So he said that he would have someone here that's as capable or more so than himself. So we have Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, ks. Olson. Deputy Secretary, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kelsey Olson, and I serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Thank you for the opportunity to let me continue where Secretary Beam picked off, or left off, excuse me, on Thursday. I'll just kind of try to cover some of the governor's budget recommendation for our budgets Secretary Beam did not touch upon. So in FY 24 and 25, we do have $150,000 of an SGF request to help support our ag laboratory, which is located in Manhattan. This laboratory provides many different services for our regulatory programs, including food safety, meat and poultry, the weights and measures program, dairy and feed, and pesticide fertilizer, as well as industrial hemp. These programs are all fee-funded programs, and their current fees are used to offset the laboratory costs. However, the additions to the laboratory, the cost of the utilities have been much more than we expected, and our rents continued to be larger than we previously paid. And so we have asked for state general funds to help cover some of those laboratory costs. This is one avenue that we've explored as opposed to looking at fee increases throughout all of the agribusiness regulatory programs that we provide through the laboratory. I think Secretary Beam briefly mentioned feral swine was discussed. The Department of Agriculture currently has a partnership with USDA Wildlife Services. We do currently provide $175,000 to help support this feral swine management. Our ask and our budget recommendation is to increase that by $25,000 in FY25 to further support that program. We do not have very many infestations of feral swine, but we continue to receive pressure from those animals as they come across our state line, both from the east as well as to the south. And I think Secretary Beam noted it, and I'll just reiterate it. It's quite easy if a group of pigs do move in, the damages that they cost to that landowner can easily exceed that $200,000 overnight. Moving on, we have a $200,000 requested to support our emergency management program. One of the key focuses of our Division of Animal Health is to protect against foreign animal diseases. This is essentially any disease that is not regularly established within the United States. And as part of that protection, we work with our producers to help build biosecurity plans. If there were to be a foreign animal disease, the biggest threat is often moving it from one site to the next. So how, as producers, do we prepare for that? What measures would we need in order to ensure that our farm is safe from potentially moving any of the diseases, or safe from anyone coming that might come onto our facility. So this funding would go to further support the work that we are doing. Some of you, I believe, have had the chance to participate in our foreign animal disease emergency exercise every December. We bring in a number of state partners, federal partners, industry stakeholders, as well as other state departments of agriculture to come and observe an exercise. We stand up an emergency management team to respond and react to an alleged threat that has been detected through the exercise in the state. We coordinate with the Highway Patrol, we coordinate with Wildlife and Parks, we work with local law enforcement, local emergency managers to try to predict and respond and think through what we would do if we were faced with a real life situation. So those funds would go to continually support those aspects that we do not only during the exercise but throughout the year. And we think this is a valuable component and a critical component for our Division of Animal Health, and we'd like to continue further supporting it with some SGF. Moving on is $50,000 to enhance our animal facility emergency aid. 2 years ago, the legislature allocated $50,000 to the Department of Agriculture to help provide cost of care, medical care, as well as food and water care to any potential licensee animals that may be seized. There are situations where animal facility inspection facility, we've come across a facility that the animals are not being properly cared for, they're in poor health, and we've utilized those funds to enter into voluntary contract agreements with shelters to provide care if those animals need to be removed from the licensee. That program has been successful. The first year, we had one seizure. That alone spent a little over $38,000. And then right before the end of that fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, we had another seizure that used up the other $12,000 that we had for FY23. We don't want to be in the habit of seizing animals. However, if there are situations where the animals are not being properly cared for, we feel that that is the best situation for those animals to remove them. At that point in time, the agency would enter into agreements with shelters to provide that housing. Those funds would be used at our local shelters and not directly spent with the agency. And an additional similar concept, we have $50,000 for our legal service support. These funds would be used to secure additional outside counsel. As you may or may not be aware, the agency continues to be challenged outside of the Office of Administrative Hearings process. So we have had lawsuits brought against us in various district courts, often pertaining to the small animal facility program, or water has been a hot item here lately as well. And we're asking for these funds so that we can go and when necessary, use a retainer to provide some additional legal support and legal counsel to our existing team. We do have a current staff of attorneys that support all of the regulatory summary order elements that go along with the agency. However, oftentimes these external lawsuits are outside of what we typically interact with or are exposed to at the agency. So that extra outside counsel would be very valuable. And lastly, I think we've had a little bit of dialogue, I know I'm expecting some more questions on this, but the governor did put in $1 million into KDA for the Farm to Food Bank program. The Kansas Department of Agriculture, along with the Kansas Food Banks, there's 3 of them, and we partnered during the past year to provide the local food assistance program in the state. This was a very successful program where we provided dollars to the food banks. The food banks then contracted with growers to provide their products, their meats, their cheeses, their fruits and vegetables to the food banks to help food insecure individuals. When the request was made, we had a lot of support from the producers who were involved, from the food banks that were able to buy local foods that they had not previously been able to do so. And we thought this was a great program and an opportunity for us to continue that beyond the capacity of what was established with the grant. I know Senator Fagg, he asked last week, how did we derive at the $1 million? Well, honestly, it was a number that we settled on. The previous funds were a little over $2 million that were distributed. We thought that it would be reasonable to make a $1 million ask of continuing something that had been started, maybe not to the full amount that we had received for federal funding, but yet a significant enough dollar that could be split between the 3 different food banks that provide coverage to all 105 counties in our state. So I don't know that it's, there's not a lot of great sound numbers. We just thought it was a great starting point, and would certainly defer to you if you have other ideas as far as up or down what that might be. So with that, those are the enhancements that we've requested for adjusted 24 as well as 25, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
When you say enhancements, most of these are from state general fund dollars, or all are from state general fund?
They are all state general fund requests.
And what is the total amount that you're requesting of additional taxpayer money?
It is $1,525,000.
$1.5 million.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for covering for Mike. I think you do a lot better job.
Oh.
Being involved with the local food program, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful thing, does that, because you put money into it, does that make us liable if something bad happens, somebody gets a hold of some bad fruit or something, and there's something bad happens, a disaster of some sort? Because if we're putting money into it, could that make us liable?
So the way we set up the program was that while the agency does have the funds to administer, we actually enter into contracts with the food banks. So they sign a contract with us for the funds to expend on the products. They then in turn enter into contracts with the producers. So the agency isn't necessarily liable. What our role was initially was to, when we set up the program, we screened anyone who applied to sell to the food banks. We ensured that they were properly licensed with the state and met any and all of the necessary food safety handling components.
Still, again, I mean, in that contract that you have contract with someone else, is there anywhere in those contracts that assure that our Department of Ag or Kansas government is not liable in case we have an outbreak of something in a tomato or whatever?
I'd have to check with our legal team and look at that contract again. I do know that there was some product this summer that was received by the food banks, and they have the authority to reject it. It was not at the caliber of quality that they wanted and believed that they were purchasing. And so they have sent away product that was being provided to them based on their contract obligations between the food bank. And if I may, I might just add that with us today is also Karen Siebert. She's with Harvesters, and she is representing the food banks here. In case there's any more detailed questions, I think she'd be eager. I believe she also submitted testimony in support of this enhancement as well.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question is also concerning the food bank. If you can't answer that, that would be fine. You could pass it on to the other lady. I forgot who she said her name was. On the food bank, are there people, I understand they get this to be money, this to be food they don't have to pay for. And who is eligible in the food bank, and do we know how many people are in the food bank? Thank you.
I am going to pass that to Karen, if you would be so kind.
Sure, happy to. Hi, I'm Karen Siebert, and I'm Advocacy and Public Policy Advisor for Harvesters, the Community Food Network, and we're based here in Kansas City and Topeka, serve basically the northeast corner of the state, but also representing the second Harvest Community Food Bank that has about 4 counties in this extreme northeast corner of the state, and then the Kansas Food Bank out of Wichita, which serves the remaining 85 counties. So together, we three food banks serve 105 all 105 counties in the state. And last year, we distributed about 46 million pounds of food to a network of 555 charitable food pantries around the state. A lot of people don't quite know how a food bank works. We're a large food collection and distribution facility. We
just move forward with answering the question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Make a presentation.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, so those food pantries that we're providing to are all their individual 501c3 charitable organizations. A lot of those are the church food pantries that you know of in your community. And so those pantries all have, they have to do, be a 501c3, follow certain food safety requirements, and go through food safety training. But other than that, the requirements that they provide in their communities for the people coming to them to need are their own. So there are certain pantries that will say, we only want to serve people in this zip code. Certain pantries will require income verification. Others do not. It just varies. So we don't control any of that in those individual pantries. So.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question's for Deputy Secretary Olson. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for also contacting me last December when the Calmaine facility in Rice County had an outbreak of avian influenza. And I think Secretary Beam briefly touched on this, but could you kind of tell for the rest of the committee and everyone else listening how that testing process works, and then the euthanization of those infected birds? I have family in the area, so they keep me apprised of everything that's happening, but I'd like to hear from the department on their perspective.
Certainly. Thank you for that question. So one of the activities that our Division of Animal Health is charged with is responding to an outbreak. High-path avian influenza is considered a foreign animal disease. And so it's something that the United States has been dealing with for the last 2 years, roughly. And many of the producers, we've tried to do a lot of outreach and education as to what to be looking for, signs and symptoms, if they have a flock that might be infected. In the case of Calmaine, they did notice a larger than normal death loss in one of their barns initially. And this would be true for any of the facilities. They noted a higher death loss. If they have a veterinarian who works regularly with them, they will have them come out. We are then notified, and either the veterinarian on site will help take samples, or one of our state veterinarians will go and take a sample for the testing to determine what's going on. That sample is then transported to a diagnostic lab. Depending on where we are at in the process, if this is a first case in the state, that test has to be confirmed with a National Ag Anom Lab. I forget the acronym, I apologize. But once the disease has been noted in the state, we can confirm it at a state diagnostic lab. So the recent facilities we've been responding to, we have sent those to K-State for processing. Usually within 24 hours, they notify us if it is a silly language, but a non-negative. They don't say it's positive, but it's a non-negative. They wait for a final confirmation to ensure the non-negative down the road. But if it's a disease we have present, we can respond immediately once we have that non-negative. The agency then assigns a site manager to work with that facility. And each facility is different in how we respond. Some of them have the capabilities to do a lot of the work themselves. And in other facilities, it's a one-man show that they take care of their birds, and then so they need a lot of extra manpower. But there's a number of things that go into it. Planning what is the appropriate depopulation method that has to be confirmed by the USDA. APHIS, Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service, has to confirm that process. And then we build those plans and we try to get out within hours to start depopulating, because the high-path avian influenza is a very nasty disease, and the birds will suffer once they're infected with that. So we want to alleviate any of that suffering as quickly as possible. Then there's also, after the birds are removed, there's also a process in which that facility has to go through a clean period where there is environmental samples taken to ensure that the facility does not have the virus present. Depending on the virus, that can linger, it can be in the cracks, it can be in the straw. Like, we have to clean all of that out, sanitize the facility. It sets for a period of time, and then they can repopulate if that virus is no longer present in their area. I hope that was enough information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. That was very thorough, but that's exactly what I was wanting. That's exactly what I was wanting. Will this affect any of the 4-H poultry shows across the state this coming summer for their fairs? I know that's just kind of a side effect of having an outbreak like that in the state. So
We hope not. You know, the outbreak's been present, and we've been able to keep those shows going for the last 2 show seasons. So assuming that there's not a dramatic shift, I think we would be able to continue to have those. We will continue to provide education about signs and symptoms, what to look for. You know, oftentimes those birds are checked in, and if they look sickly, we encourage them to keep them from being at the show so that we are not contaminating other animals in the area.
Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. The reappropriation of $6.4 million in 2024, what didn't we spend, or what caused that?
So that question relates to the state water plan funds, and I have a very detailed breakdown of what's being carried over. But in conservation, there's 8 different programs that have approximately almost $5.2 million that were carryover. The largest being in the water resource cost share, and the next. That was about 1.9 million. There's roughly 100,000 in non-point. And then there is also just under $700,000 in water appropriations for water use and basin dollars that were not spent at the end of the fiscal year that were carried over, as well as a little bit in the water management for the interstate compact and the basin funding. So I'm happy to provide a detailed breakdown for you of that if you would like. But it's quite a little list.
Be helpful, thank you.
Certainly.
I got one more. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one goes into a different area. Livestock investigators, the 50,000. So you'd asked for it, Governor did not recommend it. How much money do you get for that in the last 10 years? Has that been successful in that kind of thing? I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. You're requesting it, and I'm just wondering how the program's working.
Certainly, thank you. Currently, our brand fees are used to cover not only providing the brand services, but then also to cover a portion of the cost when it comes to our contract with the Attorney General. The agency is actually authorized to have 2 livestock brand investigators, and in the early 2010s, I believe it was 2016 or 17, the previous administration entered into a contract with the Attorney General to provide that service. And through the years, our current contract is we provide about $190,000 to cover the cost of 2 employees, their travel, their vehicle expenses. The Attorney General provides some education and training. They also provide firearm training because they do carry a firearm with them. And that partnership has been very valuable. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there have been a number of increased livestock thefts in the state. As recently as last month, I believe there was one in Pottawatomie County, one in Wabunsee County, and those investigators go out, conduct an investigation, and try to track down those individuals that committed those crimes or identify where the animals are. Sometimes they are just misplaced. Sometimes there's something nefarious that has happened.
I don't see additional questions from the committee. I do have several questions. On the Agriculture Laboratory, $150,000 state general fund, you said that you were asking for state general fund money rather than fee increases. Why not increase the fees versus the state general fund?
Well, we believe we've talked through that quite a bit as we evaluated what, as an agency, we were going to bring forward. I believe that the lab provides a strong public service in ensuring that the foods that we all consume on a regular basis in the state, and we appreciate that. I think that there's a public service component to this. So instead of looking at fee increases to those licensees and that regulated community, we're asking for the state general fund to help support those activities.
Are there adequate funds in the fee fund for the 150?
Not fairly across all programs. So each one of those programs, we have funds are provided based on the volume of work that the lab does for that program. And I can tell you at least one, maybe 2 of the programs would be able to withstand a slight increase, and we have been pulling on their fee funds a little bit heavier in order to make things meet. However, not all the programs would be able to do that without a fee increase. And so, again, as we try to ensure that we have public safety for all, without going back and looking at the fee increases by those programs, we've asked for state general fund.
Do you have statutory authority to increase the fees?
It's going to vary by each program. I'm going to there's one, I know that it's capped at our limit, our weights and measures, that our fees are set in statute, the rates that we are done. It's going to vary by program, and if you want that specific breakdown, I can give you those details following. I don't have it immediately with me. I apologize.
Moving down, and what I'm looking at, committee, is a sheet that I was given regarding the request for additional taxpayer money. The feral swine management partnership, you're asking for $25,000. I don't have a problem with that. But the question you mentioned that currently the 175 goes to the USDA to trap and remove feral swine. Trap and destroy?
Yes, they are depopulated once they are trapped.
Rednecks would call it something else, but now are these feral swine tested to see if they have any diseases?
They are. So part of the USDA Wildlife and Services actively monitor all of those animals. There is DNA sequencing that is done to try to determine where they might be coming from, or if there's some that by chance do get established. And then they also run them for diseases that they might carry, as we are quite concerned with potential spreading of viruses and diseases through the wild population.
I presumed that, but I wanted it to be said out loud. Circling back around to what you had spent some time on, and that was the Farm to Food Bank program and the $1 million, which is a nice round number. So it almost looks like possibly apparently Senator Fagg had requested or asked, just like picking a number out of the air rather than saying, okay, this is what we think we will spend. It's like, okay, here's $1 million. Until you want to, so apparently there was no analysis of exactly what the right amount would be. I mean, I don't know why it's not 925,000 or $1.1 million or something like that.
So if I may, the previous funding was actually 2.3 million in one round, and then Secretary Beam mentioned that we received another 2.5 million. We were trying to be conservative in our responses because the food banks certainly have the need, and they do not have any funds of their own to purchase food. So the request, quite honestly, could have been $7,236,000 if you would like it to be. I mean, the volume of food that they would like to go through is more than what we are asking. This is just a tip of the iceberg of what it will support.
I have a document that's been provided to the committee. It's a memorandum dated January the 26th, and on the very, well, I guess it's not the very last page, but it's on a page. It mentions that in May of 2020, there was a temporary emergency relief, which ended in 2021, and that was $2.5 million of federal money. So the federal government started an additional government program. And then last summer, there was an additional $2.5 million, and those funds are about to run out. The last sentence baffles me. It says the $1 million in the governor's budget would help sustain this program in Kansas for many years to come. If we spent since 2020 $5 million, how's $8 million going to sustain the program for many years to come?
I do believe it's the intent that this request would be beyond 1 year. It would be beyond FY25 of what's being requested.
That's what I presumed, but I wanted it to be said. So if we start down this road, committee, we're committing to an ongoing new government program, new state-funded government program, that I would urge us to proceed with great caution on that request. I'm looking at my notes to see if there's anything additional. I guess I don't have anything additional at this time. Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think something I learned too, they do a very good job of going out and getting donations. Don't you spend, wasn't it like 29 million? This million's only a little piece of this that goes on, if I remember right. Can you talk about outside the $1 million, what kind of money was raised on the program?
For the food banks?
Yes.
I would defer to Karen if that's okay.
That would be interesting to hear that number. That kind of caught my ear one day.
Sure, thank you. When we were talking, Senator Fagg, that is Harvester's budget, and that is, we do serve both Kansas and Missouri. We actually serve more people in Missouri, so that is our overall budget. We operate on donations. We were designed as a conduit between the faith community and the business community that was throwing away food, and the faith community that had food pantries that had people coming to them in need. So we operate on a donation model, and that we've purchased very little food for our program. What we do is we use those funds to hire trucks and drivers and move food from where there's excess to where there's need. We have our founder, Father Pat, who was one of the founders of Harvesters, said, food banking is where Mother Teresa meets the Teamsters. We are moving food around, and that's where those expenses are usually coming from, if that helps.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, and I have a question as well. When you talk about, getting donations of food, does this make a difference in those food pantries being able to have fresh produce? I'm assuming that a lot of the donated food is food that's about to expire, or, you can't really store lettuce very long in a warehouse, but if a local farmer produced it and it could be purchased, then you could get fresh lettuce at your food bank. Is that?
That's correct. We have had great support from our food pantries. They're so appreciative of the food they've gotten from local Kansas farmers in the last couple of years, in part because it is so fresh. It's really great stuff that's come just right from the field. When we're operating with donations, everything we get is rather distressed. I mean, you have the reason we're getting those strawberries is they're starting to go bad. So we have to turn around them and get them out as quickly as possible. We use volunteers to go through and call out the bad so that we can get as much as we can to folks in need. But this produce that is coming direct from Kansas farmers is great and long-lasting, and our pantries are very appreciative of it.
Mr. Chair, this is not another question, but I also appreciate, I've seen the numbers of how little of the tomatoes and lettuce and things like that we eat in Kansas are grown in Kansas. So I'm thinking that this investment in our local farmers would also help them get a start in food that would feed Kansans.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the border crisis, are there any requirements for anyone to show any type of ID to receive food from a food bank?
As I indicated, those rules are all at the local pantry level. So those are all determined by the 555 pantries in your community. So I don't know. We do not have a requirement for our agencies.
Thank you. See no further questions. Committee, do you have further questions of Deputy Secretary Olson? And Deputy Secretary, do you have anything additional for the good of the committee? All right. Thank you for appearing before the committee. We will proceed with, because we've had this information from the Department of Agriculture for a period of time, working their budget, and we shall see how far we get. If we do not complete on agriculture, we will pick them up first thing tomorrow. But I will remind the committee, everyone on this committee, apparently, from what I have seen, is supporting some type of tax cuts during this legislative session. So just because we have additional money doesn't mean we need to necessarily start adding funding to agencies that potentially would be carried on in whether they are in the enhancements request for additional taxpayer money or in their regular budget. So with that, committee, do you have thoughts or recommendations for the Department of Agriculture's budget for fiscal year 2024? We'll take these one year at a time. Most of the requests that you have, I don't know, committee, if you have a one-page document in front of you. At the top it says Department of Agriculture Budget Enhancement Request. This is something that we were given many days ago. If you do not, then there are plenty of other documents that we have been provided, which I appreciate how the Department of Agriculture has worked very diligently to provide us with good information for all of their requests. Senator, mine's got all kinds of notes on it. And even if you do not have it, the information in some of the other documents is very well provided for you. We have a document from January the 31st and one from January the 26th that have all of the information on regarding these requests. There are some that the chair has no problem with adding the additional funding, the legal services support, the feral swine management. The legal services support is $50,000. Sadly, we are in a day and age when there is constantly litigation going on, so I do believe that the department does need to have this additional funds at their disposal. The feral swine management, adding to the $175,000, they've got $25,000 to make certain that we do not have an infestation of feral swine is vital, I believe, to our state. So those are two that, and then the livestock investigator partnership, I guess that is three, that's $50,000. The governor did not recommend that increase request, which I do not know why, which is fine. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You, I think, indicated that you wanted to do these, the years separately?
Correct.
So are we, I think we're talking about some of the enhancements in 2025, like for the feral swine or?
You are correct. Thank you, Senator Francisco. I just looked at the top and it said fiscal year 24 and then halfway down. Thank you for correcting the chair. So we will stick with 2024. And so,
Mr. Chair, I'm hearing that you do have a lot of concerns with the amount of state money that we're talking about. And one of the larger expenditures that hasn't been made before is the money for the Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge impairment. And I understand that's because, now that's coming from the water plan, but that's because we're looking for support for those farmers rather than have their water rights limited. But I'm thinking that's a huge expenditure to help those farmers. So when we get to 2025, I'd hate to see that much money going to one area and then not money. So I don't know that there'd be any way to do it, but I'd like to transfer $6 million to the Rattlesnake Creek area.
and the funds would come from, and do you have a page in the fiscal?
Well, I'm looking on page 9 of the budget. But this is state water plan fund transfers.
And that is the top item on page 9,
It's
correct?
the top item on page 9.
And so the recommendation is to transfer 7 million, that's the governor's rec. You're wanting to reduce that to 6, is that correct?
If I could find a way to get that extra million into FY 2025 and use it for the food banks.
That's state water plan funding.
I said I would need help from our staff, but I just think I'm noting that we are, if we make a recommendation for this budget for 2024, we are putting a significant amount of money to help one group of farmers in one area.
Mr. Drury, do you have a thought as to, I think you understand what Senator Francisco is asking or her desires?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do apologize for my voice this morning.
Sounds good. Deep bass.
I would note that those state water plan fund transfers were approved by the State Finance Council on November 13th, 2023. So I understand what the senator is doing. I would need to take a look to see if those transfers have already occurred. The budget recommendation essentially puts what the State Finance Council action was into the budget. So I understand that, but that is based on State Finance Council action that has already taken place in November of last year.
Francisco?
I will not ask the committee to look at that, but I do just want to recognize that concern.
Any further information, Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here on the $3 million for dam construction and rehab, which is part of what Senator Francisco was talking. We just learned about that. The $3 million, how did we set that number? Was, you know, some of these water requests that I've heard applications has been $200 and $300 million. And I don't know how serious a problem that is and what they arrived on $3 million. And where is that money going to be spent? So I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we can do that for the same reason he just gave here. So that's a concern I have in there too. Because I've seen another, I think it's Wildlife and Parks has $2.5 million for dam construction or rehab. All of a sudden we got this in kind of different budgets, and I'm learning in that area. So thank you.
It is difficult to follow when you have money being transferred among agencies. I did have a question, Mr. Drury. The agriculture laboratory that is a 2024 request of $150,000, did the governor recommend that funding? I didn't seem to find it right quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, if you turn to page 14 of the budget analysis document, it will show you what the agency recommended and then what was included or not included from the governor. That $150,000 for laboratory supplies in 2024 was recommended by the governor.
I saw that chart, but I couldn't ascertain what was 24 and what was 25. So how do I?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The top section of the table says FY 2024 supplementals. They're not two separate tables, one for 24 and one for 25. They're all in the same table. It's just the top half or top third really is 24, and then the bottom half or bottom two-thirds is 2025.
Thank you. I can see that now. Committee, as far as the agricultural laboratory, I have no problem with them receiving the funding, but we heard that it has been from fees in the past. They could increase fees for the users, and the funds are potentially there for most of the funding. So to get the ball started, I'm going to suggest that we recommend the agriculture laboratory funding be deleted from state general fund and the agency be authorized from fee funds. Would that be the way, Mr. Drury, to say that? All right. Senator McGinn.
I guess I'm not 100% sure. I heard, I thought there were some areas that are capped. So.
There are some, you are correct. So potentially there would be some lag or some places that they would not have the agriculture laboratory funding available. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to see the list of where we are on the fee funds, and I'd also like to find out where we are in the time frame, because if they've already paid their fees, and this is for 24, I don't know that we're going to be able to back up and get the money from increasing the funds. So I think it's something that if we're saying there is room, or I mean, if it takes statutory action, then there's going to be a delay. But I don't think for FY 2024, I think we want those laboratories to continue to operate, and I don't think we could make a change in this current fiscal year that would get them the money that they need to get through the end of the year. That probably could have been another question for the agency is, are they up against not being able to pay for those fees? And I sort of see a nod.
So we'll ask for the fee fund balances. So we may not be able to complete 2024, but Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A fee for a certain agency or something. There's nothing but a regressive tax, isn't it? I mean, we're sometimes on these fees, we are feeing these people that they have to raise their costs or whatever, or they're not going to make money. I think sometimes when we're looking at these fees, we got to keep these agencies or these businesses in mind, because we might fee them right out of business, because it's a fee's a tax. But, you know, however you want to look at it, it's a tax.
Senator Dahl, I agree with you 100%. State general fund are our tax dollars from all Kansans. And so that's the reason that I was looking at the fee fund increase. Or not fee fund increase, but taking the money, the 150 from fee funds rather than state general funds. Senator Dahl.
Yeah, you're saying you're taking it from all Kansans. Well, we're going to be taking it from all Kansans regardless, because these people that are paying these fees are going to have to raise their costs. So I would think that all Kansas eventually is going to pay it one way or another. So I respectfully
Disagree with the chair?
disagree with the chair, yes.
And I understand that, and I've made a note that you have said that for future reference to come back. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm going to go back to what Senator Fagg was asking about with the $3 million on the water plan fund transfer to the to these assistance programs. Is this $3 million for dam construction and rehabilitation? Is that specifically for the Rattlesnake Creek Basin and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge? Because I just want to reiterate, it's Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, and if they're building dams or constructing dams or rehabbing dams at Quivira, that should be done with federal funds, not state funds. So I'm just asking, who is that $3 million for, and where's it going?
Mr. Drury, can you answer that for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation of the State Water Plan Fund does correspond with the State Finance Council action from November 13. That's $10 million in total. $7 million in particular is for Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira. The $3 million is for dam construction and rehabilitation. I cannot speak to the in particular dams that would be included in that amount, but I would note that those are two separate issues: $7 million for Rattlesnake Creek and Quivira, and then $3 million for dam construction rehabilitation.
Senator Straub, does that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. Chair, actually, no, that's how I read it, but I don't think that that's very clear on stating if that's for other dam constructions across the state, or if that is specifically to this issue. It's all in the same paragraph. That's why I'm asking.
So, Mr. Drury, do you have anything additional?
Mr. Chair, I would just state that they are in the same paragraph as describing the total transfers, but they are two discrete, different initiatives with those transfers from the Water Office to the Department of Agriculture.
Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I think might help everybody that's having a problem with the water flowing back and forth amongst the agencies, and I don't see it in my packet, but we used to receive a legal size sheet, one-page sheet that showed all the water plan money and what went into ag and what went into wildlife and parks. Did it come out of EDIF? Did it come out of the statute 6 million, or did it come out of the new money that we're seeing now? And I don't know, I see Earl and I'm looking at Luke. If we could get that, I think would be very helpful to everyone.
We will make that request.
Okay.
It's a parent committee. We're up against the clock. We will not have time to wrap up the Department of Agriculture. The department has heard the questions, and we're going to ask for additional information from them. Senator McGinn.
Well, I was going to make one more comment, but if you
Sure.
want to adjourn on, I'm okay with that. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, just back to the $150,000 for the ag laboratory. I appreciate Senator Dahl's comments, but I will go back and look, and it's meat and poultry, dairy feed, food safety, lodging, pesticides, weights and measures. And I had an audit done that turned into a full-bloom audit on weights and measures. These are very important, what do I want to say, actions that the department has to do. On the weights and measures, you know, they didn't have enough people, underfunded. But what that does is when you go to the grocery store and you put that steak on the scale or whatever they do, I've had situations where the scale and the register is inaccurate, and those have to be tested. And that goes clear from the grocery store to the co-ops and weighing your wheat and your corn. So I want to support that, and I'll just leave with that, and we can pick up that argument when we get back here tomorrow.
Certainly, and we can determine, again, it's not the intent of the chair to eliminate the funding, it's just where is the money going to come from on that particular issue. Are there anything, additional questions, committee, or information you would request of the agency prior to adjournment? And we will pick up tomorrow. And by the way, committee, tomorrow we will need to move fairly quickly. It will be the majority of the committee as far as the wishes are concerned on the budget recommendations, not just the chair. You can always write a minority report, which may or may not happen from certain members of the committee if things are different than they personally desire. But we will need to finish the Department of Agriculture as well as Wildlife and Parks tomorrow. And both of these agencies can take some time, but we'll keep moving as fast as possible, particularly Wildlife and Parks. We've got several pieces of information, requests for taxpayer savings that the chair will be making. So I guess be here on time. We'll start on time and hopefully get our work done by the end of the day tomorrow. We are adjourned.